Wildcard question is going to go to Dick Greco. Mr. Greco, you were asked about race relations in Tampa on Tuesday night. And you mentioned that during a riot in 1967, your first year in office, that nobody was hurt in this riot, saying it was more like a panty-raid type thing. And the local media has had a lot of fun with this. This is TBT today has come out with a kind of a colorful shot there. Subsequently, it's been learned that you weren't in office when that riot occurred, which led to a black teenager's death. And you said that you've never seen hatred in Tampa between the races. Some members of the black community have expressed some disappointment in your comments the other night. What would you say to them about that? And also pick up on what Ed Taranchik said the other night as well, if you could, and other candidates if they like to, which is that tension still exists in parts of the black community with regards to the police.
Well, they had every right to take offense. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. I told them earlier what we were laughing at. You have these notes, and then you talk about a panty raid and don't finish the sentence in 30 seconds, which you normally have. And I apologize for that, and I called a couple of the people that should have been offended by it. What I really meant was, I said when I was mayor in 1967, which was true, this wasn't the 1967 event. It happened, I think, in March of '68. We had several riots and near riots where I was on the street. And what I had reference to is in Tampa, when a college or something had a panty raid or something, it happened all over the country. I likened it more to that type of thing than I did hatred, and I'll tell you why. That night I'll never forget, and it was not in '67, it was several months later, and that was a misnomer. Our riot police were gathering on Cass Street with dogs and riot guns and so forth, and I didn't want to see anybody get hurt. They were shooting, people started some fires, and I walked down the street. Some of the people who started out with me ran the other direction when they heard firing. I stayed up in front of a flower pot in front of the Pyramid Lounge, and I told everybody to come to my office. I didn't want anybody to get hurt. I wasn't worried about my own life. And guess what we did? The first black face in the city office, the first black fireman, and on-the-job training program, the first black city attorney in the South, and on and on. No one has ever done, ever, for the black community what I did, because it was right. And today, we have never hated one another. If they would have, they could have shot me or anybody else.
Thank you, Mayor Greco. Anybody else want to weigh in on the question? Rose Rolita.
Yes, I do. You know, sometimes we've been in this circuit for, it seems like 100 years, but it's been a few weeks. And we go through this fast lane, we say things, and then, of course, we don't have the opportunity to correct them. I'm not his attorney. I'm not defending him or criticizing him. But what I'm saying is just, for example, a while ago, I said rehabilitation of the homeless. Dear God, I'm a consultant pharmacist that's worked at ACTS with many of our downtrodden citizens, and it's not necessarily rehabilitation. It was too late to say that, but for the grace of God would go us. So that sometimes happens because we're going through this drilled fast. But in answer to your question, Mitch, just today I attended one of the Tampa Police Department meetings that Jane Castor headed up, just to get some internal investigations about what's going on and looking at different departments. And Chief Castor said something that, boy, is really true. You can have your team, your staff, your group, your police officers do 1,000 nice things, and there are a couple out there that think because they have a badge and a gun that they're hot dogs. So what happens is that happens. I have talked to many of my friends in the African American community, and that's the case. So some that don't understand what they have, and that is a responsibility, not a right, mistreat a certain sector of our community, and then we go from there. We have to correct that by the leadership that I'm going to bring as your mayor, to understand that we have to have a compassionate side, a side that appreciates people, that respects them. Otherwise, they have no business in city government. And that's what I think happens when things like
Bob
that.
Buckhorn, you want to say something?
Mitch, I'm thankful that the mayor apologized, because I know there were some feelings out in the community that were very raw, that were very upset, that felt that it did a disservice to the victims' families. It did a disservice to the merchants on Central Avenue. That community has never really recovered from those riots in the early '60s, and I take the mayor at his word for that. But I think moving beyond that, we need to look at the record of who's been engaged in this and who's been reaching out to the minority community, not just at election time, but who's out there every day. I mean, Mayor Greco, during his term there, did his very best to eliminate the Women and Minority Business Program that gave women and minority businesses the opportunity, not a guaranteed result, but the opportunity to have a chance. It didn't guarantee the outcomes, but it certainly guaranteed the opportunity. We stopped it. It was the right thing to do. But don't underestimate things, folks. Race relations in this community, in this country, is the great schism that exists that no one talks about. And until we're able to reach beyond the color of our skin and do what Martin Luther King talked about in terms of the content of our character, we will never truly be one America. I mean, we talk about being biracial. I think Tom Scott would tell you something very different from that, and he's absolutely right. We need to do a much better job at reaching out to each other, about celebrating our diversity. It is our strength. It is what makes us different in this community. We are a true paella, and that makes us more economically competitive, but we've got to understand.
Thanks, Dick.
We've got to celebrate.
Excuse me, Bob Buckhorn. Thank you. Tom Scott?
My experience as an African American is a lot different for everybody's up here. 1998, as a county commissioner, I was pulled over by a deputy sheriff. I was driving a Lexus, didn't have on a suit and tie. In fact, I had on gym shorts and a white T-shirt. I was pulled over after leaving the airport and was made to get out the car, walk a line, do the whole thing, touch your nose and all that. I asked him, why did he pull me over? Well, it looked like you were drunk. Well, I don't even drink. I said, let me just inform you who I am. At that point, he said, I want to apologize. I didn't mean any harm. Well, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. And that's something we have to work on. The chief cannot control everybody day by day. The mayor can't either on nobody's job. But what you can do is teach sensitivity and say, I would not tolerate that kind of insensitiveness. And so all our experience is different. We've come a long way in this country. We've come a long way in this community. As an African American, I was elected 3 terms as chairman by my colleagues, who are all Caucasian, Anglo. 3 terms.
All right, thank you. Ed Tomarishik?
One of the most distressing things I have read is when 2 of our officers were killed, some people in the African American community didn't want to participate in the investigation. More recently, 2 St. Petersburg police officers were killed, and there were some very disturbing reports about comments made. Now, those comments are wrong, but they attest to something more fundamental that we need to somehow address. And I don't have any answers there. As mayor, I put some time and resources into that to understand that, because our first line of defense against crime are neighbors and neighborhoods. And if people don't feel comfortable calling on the police to help them, it's a big problem. And again, I don't know how to get at it. I would reach out to the community to try and figure out what to do about that, but it's very troubling. Now, I built affordable homes in West Tampa, where I built my model homes, was the 5th worst drug center, I'm told. I don't know that, but I've been told that by the police department. And in one course of a 6-month period, there were 7 murders in the neighborhood, and I was still building homes there. And I know what the attitudes of some of the residents are there, and somehow, I don't have answers, but somehow we need to peel those layers of the onion back and start addressing some of those fundamental attitudes. And they go to kind of what Tom was talking about, but until we do that, we're not going to have truly safe urban neighborhoods.
All right, thanks, Ed Tomarishik.